Okay, the application that we decided to build is a application that pulls in up to 12 Excel sheets, and these Excel sheets are specifically formatted for country, visits, new visits, bounce rate, pages viewed per visit, and average duration at the time, or average duration or time that the person has spent on the site. It uses this to produce information that you can see here, and produces graphs. You can have up to 5 graphs in specific spots on this application. To show you how it runs, first if you select the run application, you get this pop-up message box that says this application can take up to 12 specifically formatted Excel files. So if you select less than 12, let's say I select 1, it's going to give me an error. It says you must select at least 3 files. We have 3 because of the median here. It's best for medians for 3 or above. If you basically create an extra worksheet, so there's 13 here. If you select over 12, it says you've selected too many files. We decided to limit it just to 12 files so the application will run faster. I'm not really sure how it would run on 24 files, 48 files, or how many files you decide to pull in, so we put a limit on it. So if we click retry, select those files, I'm only going to choose, let's see, I'll choose 4 or 5. So if we select those, the application runs, and you can see that we're presented with this second user form where you can select a different region. So we're going to select Australia. We select average. We select one of these, so let's do average. Or let's do median because we did average on the example that was there before. So you can see that it does populate the other side. And we'll choose bar graphs because we chose line graphs before. Select all of these instead of just one or the other. If we click run, then it produces this application with all these different graphs and this information here. The median visit is 905 visits, okay? And that's per month. It depends on the specific time frame. So each of these is for a 1 month period. If you did a week, it'd be 905 visits for a week. But these reports were pulled in from Google Analytics over the course of a month, and we have 12 different months there. So how does this application actually run? Well, we can show you if we actually pull this over. We can look into the modules. Everything is ran through this module right here called sub main, and it calls all of our other functions that we need to. Just to make it clean, we decided to put it into one main sub, and then basically parse all of our subs that are smaller into different areas. We also have these global variables, and basically they're Boolean, so they're true or false, and they can be used through any sub or any form. So when you first run the application, if there's anything that's been on there before, it deletes any extra worksheets that are not to the application. It then deletes old charts, so it'll delete all of these. Okay, and it also will clear the contents of this range right here. So it'll clear those contents and reset it back to as if the application had never been ran. We then turn off screen updating. The reason being, when you pull in these items, we want it to stay on the screen. We don't want it to be distracting that it's flashing or things are changing in the background. So then we call the initial form. The initial form right here has that text on there and 2 buttons. If you click the cancel button, it basically unloads that form and then ends the whole program. If you click the browse button, I believe that's what it says, select files is what we labeled that as. If you click that, whenever you're running the application, it calls in this sub right here, call import Excel files. And that is actually right here under our main sub. So there's a few items in this. First, we declared our variables right here. We have simple file dialog box. We have our integers. We have a Boolean that says is complete, the string path of our file, and our file name. We initialize our variables, I to 1, and we want that Boolean to be false. We're going to use this Boolean later down here whenever it's ran through all the items that we've let's say we've selected 3 or 4 worksheets, if we've ran through all of those, then that'll change to true, and it'll end this sub right here. So what we're doing is, first we're prompting the user to select files with the file dialog box. So when they click that select files right here, it will pop up and it will say the normal Windows browser where you can browse and find your files. Okay, and we're limiting those to XLS or XLSX files. So you can only select Excel files. Okay, if this is just here just in case, I don't believe it's actually being used. If it's false, then if somehow the user found a way to get past not selecting anything and hit run on that browse window, if Windows didn't catch them and say, hey, you have to select a file, then this is there just in case. And then we have messages right here. So if it's the number of files that they have selected is less than 3, then say you must select at least 3 files. Again, we need that for the median. Also, you want to be able to track these metrics over time. If it's greater than 12 files, then say you've selected too many files. And on both of these, then it tells you to please retry. When you click retry, it pulls in that form intro again. Okay, and then we loop through right down here the import. We loop through that, and it loops through until it finds nothing, or a string that, or a file that is nothing. So as long as there's a file, so 2014-03 country, 2014-02 country, as long as there's a file name to it, then that's not going to change that variable is complete to that boolean to true. It'll stay false, so it'll keep importing down here. Otherwise, as soon as it gets to that where there's no files, it's complete turns true, and that is complete will stop the whole thing. Okay. Then we go back up here. Let's see. So that was with the selecting the files. So after we've selected the files, it calls this add items to list region. So we go down and find that add items to list region. And what is that sub doing? Basically, we count the number of worksheets, we have a basic counter of I, and we have a worksheets variable that is set to I. So we clear it in case it's been ran before. We want all those old results pulled out. So if there's different countries, you don't have to worry about not having data for that, so it clears that form. Then we count the number of worksheets, and if the number of worksheets is greater than 1, then for worksheets number 2, worksheet number 1 would be the application. For worksheet number 2 through the total number of worksheets, so 13, because you'll have, let's say we've imported 12 files, that'd be 13, or whatever it is. It's going to do this for loop. So for worksheet number 2 through number of worksheets, if with this form analytics options list region, so this right here, it's basically saying with this item right there, for I equals 3 to 27, so it's going to loop through regions 3 through 27 right there. For each of those, it's going to, each time, the first time it'll run through, it'll say A3. And if that value is not equal to not set, then it'll add it to that list item. Basically, this not set is if you're logged into your Gmail or any Google service, YouTube, it does not track your metrics the same way. So there's really no way to tell what it is. So Google just groups everything to not set. It's security, privacy reasons for any Google users. If you're not logged in, then it would track under their normal state or country or city or whatever region that we're looking at over here. Okay, so it's going to loop through each of those and add all those in. Okay, then you're going to get down to this right here. It's going to go to the next worksheet. Do the same thing, loop through all those, and you might notice that, oh, well, there's United States there. there's United States there, there's United States there. So what this means is it's adding, no matter what it is, it's adding every single time. So you'll have multiple versions of the same country, city, possibly. Depends on the items that you import, but we don't want that. So it calls this delete duplicate list items right here, and we're passing in that forms list region. So when we do that, this is basically using a few counters, and it's basically pulling out everything from that list, and if it's not, if it's duplicated, then it deletes it, and then it also formats it into an alphabetical list. So if we go back up to the top then, we've just gone through the add list regions to items. Okay, so what that does is that populates that list. So if we click run, this populates the list with all these items right here. Okay, so then if we go into run, we basically have for all these areas those global variables that we're going to be setting to false, and then basically it loops through here, and it's verifying that you know what the list region. Let's say the user selects Australia, it's going to set Australia equal to that global variable list region selection to Australia, the user selection, or United States, or whatever region the user selects. Okay, if they haven't selected anything, then it presents in an error message saying no region selected. Okay, it essentially does the same thing for the check boxes and for the radio buttons. So the operation value, it checks to see if it's true, or if the median value is true. If one of those is true, then the user selected something. Otherwise, tell them that they have not selected something and they must select something. And then right here we're basically nesting a additional if statement that says if the average radio button was selected, then set this global variable is average equal to true. Otherwise, we know that median was selected because they've already passed this test up here. They've already said that one of these items was selected, so we can just do the else right here. No need for an else if. Okay, basically does the same thing through the rest of those options. The main difference being this one has 4 or 5 or statements in there for the 5 variables that or checkboxes that could be selected. And then it has 5 different if statements. So it sets these global variables right here to true if the user selected one of those items. Otherwise, it says you must select at least one item. So if they select at least one item, then they won't ever get this message. If they don't select an item, they get this message. Then we unload this form and go back to the main module. So module, we go to the main sub, we turn off screen updating. Okay, so it we turn screen updating back on because we want to see these options updated on the screen. After that, it's already imported the files, it's already got all of these imported, so you'll see those. But we want to see the new information here. Okay, so we turn that back on and we call this parse analytics options. So this sub parse analytic options is right here. We have several things that we're doing here. We're counting the number of worksheets, basic counters, counter here again. I prefer to use this when I can. You can't always, it's not always easy for somebody to understand what variable I is, variable J or K, because it's not very intuitive. It doesn't tell you anything. So I try to stray away from those, but I do use them some. And then we have these arrays that we're setting. So for each item in here, we're creating an array. Visits, new visits, bounce rate, pages per visit, average duration. And then I'm counting the number of worksheets, and we're using that to basically tell the application how many index spots we need for each of those arrays. So from 1 to the number of worksheets minus 1. And this is because we have an additional worksheet here that we don't want to count. So we just subtract it. So in this case, we've pulled in 3. There's going to be a total of 4 worksheets. It says 4 worksheet, or 1 to 3. So basically it's saying 4 worksheets minus 1, 3. So it produces 3 indexes into each of these arrays. We set this and initialize this counter to 0, and it says just in case somehow the user bypassed some of the earlier stuff, we set if the number of worksheets is greater than 1, because we have to have at least 1 worksheet for this to work. It really probably should be 3 there, because we're requiring 3 worksheets from the user to figure the average, mean, and median, or average and median values. But then we use that for loop with again a I variable equals 3 through 27, and we'll go through each of these rows and find the information. So it says if worksheet, if the first item A is or A3, because that's the very first I that we're going with, is United States, and that's what the user selected, great. Otherwise, loop through till we find what the user selected. So, for example, if they selected Australia, because that's the first item, it's going to go down here till I equals 11. Okay, when it pulls I equals 11, okay, I was going to say the counter is now equal to 0 plus 1, so the counter is equal to 1. So in the first spot, because we're on the first worksheet, it's going to say index, the index position of visits is equal to B plus the I value, so or B I value, which would be B11 if they selected Australia, so 962. Does the same thing through C, D, E, and F, so it's basically just going across this row right here and making sure to grab those and put those in as the proper index spot of each array. And then we're also adding it to this range down here. So on the main application page, I found it easiest to create charts via ranges instead of doing another loop or spitting out or transposing that array back out. We're already here, we're already doing it. Just use that counter position and say from 150, this row right here. So if it's the first worksheet, counter's 1, it's going to go down, offset at 1, put in that value. Go down, offset at 1, put in that value, all the way across. Okay, then we go to the next worksheet. Everything happens again, puts it in the second array, third array spot for each of those, puts it in the proper row down here. Okay. And down here we're checking to see which of the forms the user has selected. So if that form, back on that form, if they selected an option, it set that global variable to true. So if that global variable is now equal to true, then we check it here. And if it's an average, then we update that spot, the appropriate box here. If it's not, then it goes here. If it's not average, but let's say they selected the median option, so it's going to fill out, it's going to use this else statement, it's going to fill out that median option for visits, then it should put a not applicable here. However, let's say they didn't select visits, they only selected on that form the last two, pages per visit and average visit duration. Then all these other items will have not applicable in it. So it basically populates all that information. It does that for every one of those global variables. For each of these items, there's a global variable: visits, new visits, bounce rate, average visit duration, all of that. Okay, so then we have populated all that information, so we are done with that sub. And we go back up to the main sub. And in this main sub, we are now down to the last item, which is call charting options. I left this in here. This is from earlier code. I don't think it's needed. The activating this application, that's before I turn screen updating off, but you should not need that, but just in case, it's still in there. But then we go to this call charts options sub. So that's the very last, one of the very last subs, call charts options. So it's basically, again, checking global variables. If a global variable is true, and if it's the visits variable, then we're going to create that visits chart. And if it was a, basically it's two nested if statements. If it's a bar chart, then we're creating a bar chart. Excuse me. And we run through this whole application and create all of our charts. And the only difference is these are the same exact codes for the line chart or the bar chart. And the only difference is that it has the line chart here and the bar chart there. Alright, so that's the application. Run it one more time so you can see how it works. Okay, so it's pulled in everything. We'll select average this time, line graph. Select all these items. Produces all of our charts, all of our information. You can see we still scroll down, we still have this down here that the user probably won't see. Unless they do something like try to print, then they're going to get a really long space where it's got information. Okay, thank you.